Welcome to our brand new feature on the Powder Coater podcast called In the News with Kim and Jim. Get ready for a fast-paced discussion on topics including coatings news, industry trends, climate initiatives, the right to repair, innovations, and more. Join me along with my co-host, Jim Kunkel, as we bring you what you need to know and maybe some of what you don't. Stay relevant in your business and stay tuned for our brand new Power Hour, where the temperature rises and every minute counts. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm super pumped that you're here and you're still hanging tight with me and Jim. So the first I want to bring up is actually an article about us at Maui Powder Works. And, you know, it's been a little difficult to be in business since the fires. And we were featured in a Sunday news article in the Star Advertiser because we received a large grant from the Maui Economic Development Office. And the problem with this was actually COVID funds left over from, was about $12.5 million left over from COVID that the governor announced just a couple months after the fire that it should go to Maui businesses. We're very grateful for the grants that we received, but some of the hangups was how to distribute the money because these were COVID funds and they were federally mandated to be distributed in a certain format or a certain way, which didn't quite meet the governor's intention of trying to get these funds out quickly to help people. So what ended up, happening was it was mandated, and then it went into this decision making on who was going to do it, how they were going to do it, and when they were going to do it. And it took another 6 months after that to figure that out. Part of the distribution of this one grant that we received, we have to participate in a strategic planning cohort put on by American Express and a few other people here in the state. And they actually used, the speaker on the first day of the event actually used my quote in this article. So I was like looking around going, I'm in the back of the room going, oh, they're talking about me, talking about us. Anyway, so it was a shock, but we are doing better here on Maui, and I think that we'll see through some of this difficulty. I think we're kind of in a transition, or we're turning things around now. Things are starting to get busier again with the construction going on Maui. So I think we're years away from rebuilding Lahaina for sure, but for now we're happy and grateful for the jobs that we get. So it's coming around.
That's great news, Kim.
Carbon neutrality.
Well, what I want to open up with is that the Green Building Alliance just launched a new guide to net zero. And as the article covers, and this is in Coatings World, in a recent article that was breaking news, the guide looks to help drive $35 trillion investment needed to achieve net zero. We're starting to see a refocus on the Green Building Council initiatives. And I've had an opportunity recently to participate in basically a carbon neutral coatings webinar that was done with architects related to green building. And it's interesting to see where the future is when it comes to these initiatives that were kind of started, I'd say, in the late 80s into the 90s. And there is a big, big focus, and a lot of the major investment firms that are out there that do infrastructure, but also do a lot of the architectural investment, commercial investment, they are really looking to focus a lot more attention on green building, but also energy transition goals. And this guide is meant to help guide architects, design engineers, manufacturers, business owners, doesn't matter what size you are, is to pursue these green building initiatives, go for these grants and bonds, go for these low interest loans, but also focus on the climate initiatives that have been set for goals, initial targets for 2030 and moving to 2050 and beyond, and looking at the potential for solar, looking for wind, but also other types of forms of alternative energy. So this guide is available here. And as it says here, Financing Transformation, a guide to green building for green bonds and green loans, details how various building verification and certification standards can be used to comply with global classifications and bond frameworks, setting the pathway for the global built environments to meet a sustainable 1.5 degrees Celsius climate threshold. This is the idea of trying to curtail global temperature, the rising temperatures. And it says a quote in here from Charlesworth here, the Gillian Charlesworth, CEO of BRE, which is a major a holding company of property. By unlocking significant capital, we can drive the essential decarbonization of our built environment despite the inherent challenges. This guide represents a monumental first step in coordinating a worldwide movement for green buildings, and we eagerly anticipate further collaboration to meet the challenge of climate change in the sector. And so, you're looking at roughly buildings today really kind of represent about 30% of the energy demand globally. And the idea is if a lot of these buildings and structures can be pulled off of the traditional grids. And that's a discussion that's happening right now with Congress, is that here in the lower 48, we have an energy grid system that has not been upgraded in decades and decades and decades. And as we're adding on electric vehicles, as we're adding on more data centers for AI initiatives, we just don't have the infrastructure to support the energy demand. And so now it's really going to be not an argument anymore about fossil fuels, coal, and everything. It's going to be, it doesn't matter. We need to do a little of everything, including nuclear, to be able to meet the high demand of energy, to be able to maintain, sustain, and grow when we have all these infrastructure needs. So I really applaud the Green Building Initiative because I used to participate in the late 90s in Green Building Initiative projects. And I was always amazed to see exactly with the green roofs, with repurposing rainwater that would come off the building and collection, even related to on-site waste treatment and things like that. These are amazing things that are done. And it's a great way to kind of not only address climate-related issues, carbon issues, but also to kind of make these buildings more self-sustaining, or at a minimum, some semi-sustaining, to be able to operate independent from the grid or from other type of infrastructure. So it's a good initiative, great initiative.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, despite all of the overreaching and spin on globalists taking over people's lives and stuff like that, I think that you're starting to see the more reality behind the net zero green building. And that goes hand in hand with Department of Transportation, cars, and other alternative ways to get people around town, or get them to their destination without the overuse of cars and gasoline, fuels, fossil fuels, and stuff like that. So I think you're starting to kind of see some of the more, I guess the larger global companies start to turn and pivot a little bit more towards this. It's certainly, I guess if it takes fear and I don't know, just fear of planet Earth, of sustainability, or will we live? We're on an island on a planet kind of thing. If it takes that to get these companies to kind of move around, maybe it's worth it in the end. But I have my next article is kind of ties into what you're talking about a little bit. It is based in Hawaii, and anybody that is interested in this should pay attention to Hawaii first and foremost, not just because of the fires, but because you're going to start to see Hawaii be on the forefront of a lot of this stuff. Now, this is simple enough. A bunch of youths got together and filed a lawsuit against Hawaii. This was before the fires, actually. This was kind of happened. The lawsuit was filed just after COVID was kind of ending and stuff. And we're like, what is this, right? What is this silly stuff? But they actually settled. And I guess it's kind of more of a, I don't know enough about lawsuits to comment, but it just seems like a feel good kind of lawsuit, where they're basically reaching out to the Department of Transportation in Hawaii and saying, look, our children's constitutional rights to a safe climate should be first and foremost, right? So it's kind of more of an agreement, or just kind of a commitment to plan and implement changes to reach the state's goal of net negative emissions by 2045. So we've already promised the world. I think I've mentioned this on other shows. Hawaii has already promised the world 5 years before 2050 that we will be net negative in emissions. It's a huge thing. I don't know how they're going to do it. Everything that the legislature puts forth in a law has this foreboding and I guess noose around their neck that everything needs to be considered in this net negative emissions by 2045 goal. So you're going to start to see Hawaii first and foremost on all of the front level state laws in terms of moving forward, moving this goal forward. So pay attention to Hawaii. I know it's hard to do, but we'll try to continue to bring it up here on the news with you guys. But I guess it's it's just, I don't know. It's just a reaffirming of the goal that they set out and kind of holding their hand to the flame. What do you think about that, Jim?
Well, I think for me is that we've had a couple decades of focus on fear. I remember Ted Danson back in the 90s saying that the oceans will be dead by the year 2000. And we remember, Al Gore.
And they're not.
And you remember, Al Gore's, predictions and things like that. That's fine. If that's how you want to convince people to change, you put fear into them, insert, uncertainty and fear and everything like that. But what really works is we've got a neighbor planet called Venus, and it had a carbon that basically its whole atmosphere is carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. So it's a runaway atmosphere. It's a greenhouse. It's 900 degrees Fahrenheit all day long. Sulfuric acid, rain. I mean, it's a hellish planet.
Yeah, it's a hellish place. Yeah.
So we know what can happen when you have too much carbon. Mm-hmm. We do know that carbon's produced from different sources, fossil fuels being it. We found fossil fuels hundreds and hundreds, maybe even 1,000 plus years ago, right? And we've been utilizing that for the longest time. We're always afraid of nuclear because of 3 Mile Island and things like that. There's other forms of energy. We do know that solar efficiency has gained, but it's a slow incremental gain for efficiency. And the same thing when it comes to wind. Here in Pennsylvania, if I drive about roughly an hour and a half east towards Philadelphia, There's a giant wind farm, but it's right in the middle of the basically the Chesapeake corridor. And so birds will migrate between Ontario and down into the Virginia area and the Chesapeake Bay area. And what happens with that wind farm? Most of the time, 90% of it's shut down because of bird strikes. So we understand that, wind can be the equation. Tidal can be part of the equation. So we need to look at all these different sources of energy, and to help grow us and help support, advancements, everything else that's going on. So we have to be able to look at it, but also too, we do have to realize that there's going to be down the road, you're still going to have fossil fuels, but they're not going to be relied on 80, 90%. It might be 30%, 20%. It might be just that eventually oil is just used to produce the pharmaceuticals and the plastics and things like that, but it's not going into your car, right? We're seeing that with sustainable aviation fuel. We're starting to see it with biofuels. There's so many things that can be done. And so I think what it is that it's good to have these initiatives and things like that to address it. I even had an opportunity to go to a small conference that dealt on carbon capture, and I was absolutely surprised talking to some of these technology providers where with carbon capture at a petroleum facility, they can actually take that carbon. That carbon can be commoditized. It can be monetized. It can be sold. I never really thought that. I thought they captured it, they injected it into wells, or they put it into some type of storage. And then what happens to it? I don't know. It's in the mines. It's in the wells. What happens to it? It just stays underground, which that's where carbon goes to eventually. And then there's a cycle where it's freed and it goes back into the ground. It cycles, right? And so I was absolutely amazed to see that there are markets for carbon capture. So I do support green initiatives. It's just, let's get away from that fear factor of scaring everybody. If we don't do this in 5 years,
I don't like it.
Everybody's going to be dead. And to me, I think that held everything back. If you really truly wanted to have emerging technologies and emerging energies, I think all those advocates that did the fear held it back 20, 30, 40 years because their approach was, let's scare the crap out of everybody, that if you don't change in 12 months or you pay extra money, that will, that fear, I think, is what held a lot of stuff back, because the public was like, nah, we ain't going for this. You're trying to scare us into something that we don't understand. We don't know if it's going to work yet.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to further that concept is that, typically here in the world, it's profits over people. Okay. At some point when, I don't know, but we've got to change that to people over profits.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds very unnerving, especially when you work for a company or you own a company or whatever, but it's something that when you're living in the middle of nowhere, right? We're a planet. We're basically an island, right? And when you're faced with, this is all there is, there's space exploration and all of that. But at some point, I think we're all going to kind of have this consciousness shift of, it's about people and saving the planet and doing what's best for the planet and that it's a consciousness shift. It's not, where it's not about the profits. And I don't know how that is going to shake out. It seems impossible from this purview now, because global companies are all about profits. That's who they are, so I don't know what's going to happen, what kind of existential threat, or is it going to be just a mindset change? I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's what it's going to be. I mean, we're starting to see it with the younger, as you mentioned, the youths. We're starting to see it with the younger generations where, they're coming into companies and they want to participate from entry level with decisions that are made at the company. That was a discussion I had with several, I'm, greatly, or let's say rapidly approaching 60. And, several of my friends that are, senior managers like myself, we had discussions, and we're saying that, the younger, let's say the younger professionals, they really want to get involved in the decisions and things like that. So I think the tide changes that way. I think the other thing too is that old mentality of the profit over, even to the point we'll talk about a safety issue coming up, that a lot of times you need to think about your employees. You need to think of, because your long-term growth is really based on your company, but your company only runs because it has a support mechanism. And that's typically called staff.
Right.
Because you can't do everything. I mean, I've yet to meet a CEO or an executive that can do all the jobs and he doesn't have to worry about hiring people. So you really need to have a good network behind you of people that are focused in the same thing that you are.
And, in terms of like a consciousness shift, what if we were the only viable planet in the entire universe? Wouldn't you feel kind of lonely? Like, if this is
or
all
special.
we have, right? A special, right? Exactly. Yeah. That would certainly change our mindset about this planet, about profitability, and driving for that over people. I think, and it's funny to kind of throw the alien narrative in there because, that is starting to become more of a topic. But if our reality changes about this planet, and I'm not talking flat earth stuff or anything like that, okay? I'm just saying, like, are we alone in the universe? If we are, then we owe it to the planet to do as much as we possibly can to preserve it, to make it safe, to make it healthy. That alone, it wouldn't have to be an alien invasion to do that. It would just take this new understanding of who we are. And I think that that's coming. I think it's coming. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how it's coming. I think that there's going to be a consciousness shift that's going to change everything. I certainly hope so, because the planet will benefit, right? And we can start thinking more, not more positively, but more engaged with actually wanting cleaner environments, wanting cleaner energy. We know we can't get away from this stuff, but we know that we can make it more viable, more safer. So we're kind of positive right now, but we do have some other news that we're going to talk about that is really kind of on the front lines of what we're talking about, right? This is stuff that's happening in the news right now. You never thought chemicals and lawsuits could be so interesting and engaging to watch go down, but there's a lot of stuff with OSHA, EPA, Supreme Court, methylene chloride, which is what we've been talking about these last few months. There are more developments that I think we need to get into.
Chemical industry news.
This is inside the EPA. Of course, the whole thing was Congress passed this thing called TSCA, which basically means they're going to go after Toxic Chemical Substance Control Act. That's what it's called. And one of the lowest hanging fruit is this chemical called methylene chloride. We've talked about it on the show in the past. Okay. It's an essential component to stripping and restoring metal, wood. It basically is used in a blended form to strip off paints and powder coats, okay, for a lot of restorers out there. To me, this is extremely threatening because a lot of the smaller companies, micro businesses that rely on powder coating, automotive parts or gates and railings and stuff like that, people like Maui Powder Works definitely utilize this chemical in their business. And if they're not able to do it, the next choice for them is something that is very expensive. It's another big purchase. It requires an alkaline base that's heated tank. It costs money for the tank. Our e-tank is $30,000. That's a lot for a small business, not to mention the fitting it in your shop, which we have a very small shop here. So I've been kind of, ever since this kind of came out earlier this year, I've been trying to kind of keep you guys abreast of what's going on. And the latest thing is that a group of chemical industries have gotten together and filed a lawsuit against the EPA. It all started with an EPA final ruling that methylene chloride should be extremely limited in the marketplace, in the commercial space, which means I won't have access as a business owner to utilize this chemical any longer. And they've outlined about 6 different industries, basically other chemical labs that can use it, but they have to be high level, blah, 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 blah. It's just, it's really severely limiting the access to this chemical. It was already removed off the shelves from Home Depot and Lowe's many years ago. But on the counter to that, the chemical industry has already proven the safety of this chemical and in the usage of this chemical. So there's not too much to argue there. But so the good news is that when they filed this lawsuit, they were worried about getting into the Ninth Circuit Court, which tends to be a little bit more liberal. But the good news is that they were able to get into the Fifth Circuit in Texas, which is a little bit more pro-chemical, or at least because it's oil and gas. So they get a lot of oil and gas lawsuits down there. So they think that this is a positive development. If you continue to read down this PDF here, it basically is saying that what's worrisome is that the EPA is going to try to use this methylene chloride as the low-hanging fruit in order to start attacking all PFAS and other toxic chemicals that are easily accessible in the commercial space, therefore by limiting even more and regulating more. So it's I would call it a power grab opportunity for the EPA. And what I don't understand is they've already figured out that the exposure limit is 2 parts per million. The industry itself already proved that. So what possibly could be an answer to this is just more OSHA specification and procedural stuff in the workplace. So that's the development lately, and what I think is a far overreach by the EPA to kind of go after methylene chloride in an attempt to open up a pathway to limit other volatile compounds and stuff. So that's what we'll put this PDF hopefully up in the links below. But main thing is we'll continue to keep you abreast, and I've got some more news with that too. But we'll bring that up later because, like I said, a lot is unraveling about this methylene chloride ruling and some of the fallout that's happening now. So I know you've got something to share, but that's what I wanted to share, just to kind of kick this segment off about what they're trying to do. And I don't know if you have any comments on that, Jim, but it's further developing.
I think too, and I think we're going to be talking about it related to Chevron and, about the determination with the Supreme Court yesterday. But that really has a lot to bear with this. The other thing too is when dealing with the EPA, they need to really have a longer window where they do have the ability to make determinations like this, a longer window and a more fair and balanced neutral stance to say, listen, as much as we are going to hone in on the negative, reports about certain chemicals, we also want to have other providers coming in to show safety related testing, the impact, the economic impact, and try to make a decision and have public commentary to kind of, if they're going to make a major change like this, to your point, this is going to unravel so many different businesses. A lot of businesses are going to go literally out of business because they can't afford to do the $30,000, $50,000, or they're going to have to upgrade. I mean, could you imagine if, in order for you to survive your business now, because you're relying on this, now you've not only got to add a, $30,000 to $50,000 tank and a heater and all this other stuff, you have to move from a sized building that was perfect for your business to a bigger building, which you're not going to utilize other than having this tank in there. Again, I don't know how you
have
really
to have
justify
a certain level of restoration work to begin with, or at least build it up more in order to accommodate the trade-off. You don't realize how much your electrical costs will go up to have a heated tank. And that was one thing I overlooked in the purchase of the tank. They're very expensive. I mean, in terms of a small business scaling up, and powder coating is a very heavy, expensive equipment business to get into. Whereas use of methylene chloride can help you scale that, right? So, it requires electricity. And if you're using it during the day, guess what? We're in a higher rate category now. So it's a solution, but it's not a solution that's going to be for everyone, right?
Exactly.
Powder coatings news.
The next article that I want to cover is related to a finding that was reported yesterday. I got a pop-up message on this. It's a Houston metal powder coating operation. They go by the name of Outdoor Furniture Refinishing, but they're also known as Allied Powder Coating. And this goes back to a initial investigation back in 2023. OSHA does take their time when they do have the findings, and then they report the findings. Typically, I don't talk if I have any advanced knowledge that somebody's under OSHA investigation. I say nothing until the final word comes out. But this was broke yesterday, but they are facing over. It's roughly about close to $340,000 in fines, and this is related to respiratory.
That's just blatant, though.
Hazards.
You have to be really not on the game here if you're facing that. But so what did they get written up for?
So here's the finding on it here. So it said that they uncovered over 40 safety hazards that could lead to severe health issues, including birth defects, respiratory disorders, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. And it says that the OSHA, let's call it that, they investigated the outdoor furniture refinishing known as Allied Powder Coating in December of 2023. Investigators found 39 serious violations and 5 other violations, including failure to use required safety controls for exposure to dangerous substance. And I can't say a lot of these, but there's arsenic, there's cadmium, there's beryllium, there's lead.
Yeah.
The violations include inadequate protection from inhalation hazards, lack of engineering controls for noise, failure to provide proper respirators. When you're dealing with the basically air circulation, filtration, the respiratories, that drives me crazy right there, because that's such an easy fix.
It's such an easy fix,
that.
Right? Yeah.
Then insufficient measures for handling hazardous substance. Now, I do understand, when you're dealing with lead, you typically will do a blood sample with lead if there's potential exposure. Beryllium is different because it's more gets into the DNA. It's a more insidious over the long term. It
does more than that, Jim. It passes through the blood-brain barrier. And I know beryllium because I did a segment on that and interviewed GMA Garnet. Pete is the VP.
Pete Mitchell. Mm-hmm. Pete Mitchell.
excellent guy. And we did a segment on the risks of, different types of media. Of course, they sell the garnet, which is the lowest rating for beryllium. But when you say beryllium, that leads me to believe that, the cancer exposure is the mesothelioma, which is what can happen when you have silicas and beryllium in there. And that means their sandblasting operation is doesn't have the capacity to handle the kind of level that they're doing. And it can lead to metal sickness, silicosis, and beryllium exposure. So that's actually pretty serious. And it's probably, in my experience in interviewing all these experts on sandblasting, is the rate or volume of dust that is going on in the blast room. And you need to have a powerful enough system in order to filter all that dust to keep the air clean. So I would say it's probably, out of all these 40 safety hazards, a lot of it is probably around their sandblasting capabilities.
Yeah, definitely.
Completely underutilized. But the lead, probably they're blasting a lot, although a lot of furniture is aluminum. So I'm not sure where the lead comes in if they're mostly doing furniture, metal furniture.
There is, and this, for my experience, typically where lead becomes a thing, even though they're claimed as being outdoor furniture, they probably do other type of projects.
Right.
In Pennsylvania, we have a lot of legacy bridges. They're historical landmarks. They're the plate bridges. They're the stone bridges with steel and everything like that. And a lot of them have ornamental pieces, eagles, globes,
right,
other type of ornamentals, and those tend to be also covered with lead. And the rule is, once there's lead on something, there's treated as lead all the time. Because I've had people say, "No, we blasted all the lead off." Did you? To me, it's like, I think you have to treat it once there's lead. And we had an interesting thing that goes back over a decade ago, where some blast and paint shops got in trouble because they were taking these ornamental pieces, blasting them. They would collect the blast material, and they would just go through normal processing,
recycle it. Yeah.
And it wasn't being treated as lead contaminated blast material. So they would recycle it, or they would dispose of it normal ways. And ultimately, and the state of Pennsylvania got in trouble for this, or what we call PennDOT. Ultimately, what happened was the court ruled that the blast and paint shop, yes, they are liable, but the owner of the lead was the state of Pennsylvania, and they also got in the process of being in violation and a fine. Now, the blast and paint shop pays a fine, and they suffer a business impact. The state of Pennsylvania, they have to pay a fine, but it comes out of the taxpayer dollars. But it also woke up the state Department of Transportation to say, hey, we've never viewed these ornamental pieces properly. We've always required the bridges to be blasted and considered to have the requirement of contractors that can do lead work, because this bridge 100 years ago had nothing but lead paint on it for 50 years or longer. Now we have to not only have the contractors that do the field work on the bridge structure, but also the blast and paint shops. They need to have the proper training, certification, whatever is required to handle that as a hazardous material, even though it's a ornamental giant eagle or a giant globe or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah. And I'm wondering, they must have an account that has like a lot of cast parts that they're having to blast and powder coat or something like that.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Because your point, I think with outdoor furniture, I don't know where you would get the lead, especially it's 2024. My grandmother's furniture, I think we got rid of it back in the 80s, maybe in the 90s. And, that stuff I would say probably had lead paint on it.
Yeah. We went to their website. I didn't see anything there that was just strictly lead or we we did check out their website really quick this morning before we hopped on just to see anything. But that's, on one hand, I feel for the business owner,
I agree.
Some powder coating, restoration powder coating is difficult to price or difficult to make profit off of, because when you're in that business, and we do have a business here on the island that focuses only on resort patio furniture, which is mostly aluminum. I don't know how the guy makes money, to be honest with you, because he's not doing a full restoration from what I understand. He's just sanding it and then recoating it. That's one thing, and resorts are not willing to, and big accounts like that don't want to pay a lot for their furniture to be restored. And yet it's a lot of labor to take the slings off, to put the slings back on, even if it is American made and you can get replacement parts for it, it's still difficult to restore outdoor patio furniture, or at least the aluminum brands. So, it was only because he didn't have time to give us their custom work, to do the custom work he was getting. He ended up sending all the custom work to us, which was fine by us because we didn't really want to do what he did. So, interesting story. It would be neat to kind of maybe try to interview them and see what is the story behind the story kind of thing. So we'll see about that.
Supreme Court rulings.
When you look at the different agencies, so Congress has set up over the history of Congress, agencies are set up. So they're basically appropriated, they're voted on, and they're established through Congress. Congress sets certain type of guidelines and mandates for them. They have oversight of these different federal agencies. In the past, there had been this, what they call a Chevron doctrine, where the individual agency could kind of make up their own rules. They didn't have to go to Congress and to get them to say, hey, we want to make this rule. Can you approve this for us? Which is the way it's supposed to be. They would just reinterpret things and just do it without really doing any type of really legal review, going back to Congress saying, hey, we're not quite sure about this, but this is what we want to do. Is this okay? And the vote's done. And yes, it is. This is how it goes. They notify all the businesses out there. So what was happening was you have these federal agencies that could just make up their own rules as they go along. They could change them at any time. They could reinterpret them. They could go way further and reach deeper. And really, they were causing a lot of havoc for businesses where, businesses would try to go a certain direction. And then they would find out, hey, yeah, you were going this direction based on the regulations and the rules. But guess what? We're interpreting it this extreme way. And now you're screwed. And everything you've done, investment and building this infrastructure this way, you need to rip it out and change it and do this. And so what it did was it does stifle innovation, but also the free market, because now you could have a federal agency that could just, and on a whim, make up their own rules and regulations without any real oversight or determination by Congress. So now what this does, and this is probably in our recent history, one of the greatest rulings by the Supreme Court to say, listen, agency, if you want to make major changes, you got to go back to the authority. That's Congress. You've got to petition Congress and get them to buy into it. You got to have the public review and everything like that. And then if Congress votes on it and grants it for you, then that's the way it will be. And so I think what's nice about this is it will probably calm a lot of the unknown, unforeseen things that could happen when businesses are looking to do different initiatives. Like building, we talk about like refineries. I understand that a lot of people don't want to, quote unquote, a dirty refinery in their backyard, but a lot of it, there's so much reinterpretation of federal regulations above and beyond what's on the books That's why a lot of this stuff doesn't get built.
Well, I like the word they're using here is convulsive shock, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you mean my evil plan isn't working, right? But I think what they're called it's called the Chevron deference, and basically what that means is that the Supreme Court that courts in general, judges, courts, are so stupid in making the right decisions over compliancy laws or compliancy rulings over chemicals or innovations that are bad for people or this or that, whatever the complaint or the lawsuit is about. They used to rely on the EPA and all these departments, regulatory departments in the federal government for an opinion, right, in the courts. They were deferring rather than having the judge figure it out, or because he doesn't know enough about XYZ chemical or XY, that they're deferring it to these federal agencies that somehow have some over authority or all knowing capacity to make an opinion in a court, in a rule of law, right? In a court situation. And so therefore can set these ambiguous policies, right, on and outcomes for rulings in court. So that is the convulsive shock, right? Is that at the same time, the EPA is going after methylene chloride as the low-hanging fruit. The Supreme Court, it basically throws out this ruling for future climate and environmental regulations affecting the EPA. So it kind of just gutted it a little bit, right? A full gut punch to this through the Chevron deference. Which is, I don't know how many people know that already. Obviously, if you were in the environmental protections industry or anything around environmental, you would know that. But a lot of people don't know this, right? And how important that the Supreme Court is making some landmark decisions over lots of different things. It seems like in the last couple of years, ever since the Roe v. Wade thing got reversed, it's just been one thing after another for the Supreme Court. So big decisions here.
Tech, AI, and EVs.
All right. So this is a webinar series that I've been attending. They're talking about the fear of new technology and getting over the fear of new technology. And part of it is just working with, because this is a automotive repair shop webinar, this is about working with and getting used to ADAS and some of the more high-tech equipment, high-tech stuff coming up on cars and mechanical repairs. So that's kind of the premise for this, is to help the industry, the aftermarket industry and the repair shop industry kind of get over this fear of getting into these high-tech cars and starting to repair them a little bit more. But this next segment, I want you to pay attention to the cringiness. And for those that are listening, this man's kind of scratching his head. He's getting cringy talking about this subject. You can tell he's not comfortable talking about it, but he's going to address it either way. So with that, he's talking about AI and the data that's coming from the cars that these sophisticated cars and stuff are about. So
the scariest one, and this is, in all honesty, the one that should keep you up at night, and this is going to be a very big talking point at Apex this year in regards to telematics and data in right to repair. Pretty much if you're buying a vehicle today, there's probably a 90% chance that that one's going to have an internet connection. It could be Uconnect with Chrysler. It could be OnStar with General Motors. But with these, they're constantly communicating with the vehicle, and they're looking at this data coming through. It's to improve their own products, and they've turned that data into a product. For example, you may have a billboard company that wants to know how many people on average drive by their billboard. They may go to Chrysler, they may go to Ford, they may go to GM to buy that data because it's tied to a GPS and a vehicle, and they know a little bit about the customer. So a lot of these OEMs are selling this information. Kind of scary, but there's privacy policies in place. They're a little vague. It typically happens when the vehicle is started for the first time, and everyone's like, okay. So it's a shifting technology, but the one thing you need to be aware of is it's going to start changing how you access the vehicle for diagnostics. A lot of OEMs see independent shops going in through an OBD2 connection as a security risk to their vehicle. You could be uploading some malware or something that could shut down vehicles in an area and spread it around. What they're looking for you to do, and Tesla is probably one of the first ones who do it right now, but basically your laptop communicates with their server communicates with the vehicle communicates the server, and then gives you the information back. A lot of these, it's a little difficult to look at some of the data streams and data PIDs, but it seems the way it's going to go. I know that MEMA and the Car Care Association, they've been working with OEMs for a secure portal to view this data back and forth. But this is the way it's going. That whole thing of plugging in a code reader, pulling the codes, OEMs don't want you to do that sometimes. But I have a feeling that we're going to keep that OBD2 port for as long as possible.
So, you see, Jim, they don't want you to have the data. They want to have the data. You pose a substantial risk to the data by accessing it.
Yeah.
And it can lead to hackers getting into your phone, like how they could get into your computer or your phone. They could commandeer whole fleets of cars if they lose control of this data. And they can put you out of business. Like if that wasn't just like, this is a potential for you to get out of business, I don't know what is, right? So it's again, I look to, they said that they were going to talk about it a lot during APEMEX. That's usually at the same time they have SEMA. It happens at the same time. This is one to watch for sure, and we'll continue to bring up any kind of news on it in the future, because again, it's related to right to repair. It's related to this EPA stuff with the methylene chloride. It's related to everything we've talked about today.
Well, I mean, the other aspect of it too, I don't know if you had recently read this in the news, but as we're moving into more EVs, what the future looks like after EVs. In other words, what's the next thing that's going to be evolutionary jump on EVs, right? Right now we've got some limitations, 300 miles or whatever the mileage difference is, charging stations, all this other stuff. And battery technology, it's current. But listen, evolution goes on. These cars are going to get better. They're going to become more, more flexible, more options and things like that. One of the things, because we're getting into, let's call them a smart car, is that law enforcement's asking for the ability now to commandeer vehicles, so that if you were to have a smart car, they could shut it off, or they could take control of it. In other words, steer it, make it accelerate, make it decelerate, make it stop, shut it off, and all these other things. I guess for me, when I own something, I don't want to have anybody to have the ability to control it but me. Data side of this is that, you've got people that are data brokers, they scrape data, they do all this stuff. And to now to tie all the other data that we get, our phones is sending out data, location information. So now they could buy it from multiple sources, use AI, because this is where AI, if you have any type of a database, and a lot of people will say, yeah, I got a database, but it's got a lot of garbage in it. I've seen AI go into databases and pull out nuggets that you were shocked that all that garbage data that you have in your database, to see AI be able to take it and turn it into something is outrageous. You wouldn't even imagine it. And so now all of a sudden, when you have that merging of AI with all these different data sources, and then these data brokers or these accumulators of data, either for machine learning or for selling services or doing whatever, now they have this powerful tool through AI to be able to really take all that data, and they literally can predict exactly what you're going to be doing, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it.
When are we going to have this sea change of people over profits? I think that it's all kind of culminating into some, when you think about communication and AI, it's a sea change. And everything we're talking about here is so on point and relative. I'm happy that we have this show, because we're trying to point out as many little blips on the screen as we can to kind of just keep everybody in the loop on it, because it's impossible to kind of, see it all, do it all, read it all, and I think people need to kind of hopefully, have one place where they can gain all this stuff, and when, not be forever, searching, right?
Well, Kim, and the thing is, you have to realize with AI, we're literally at the novice, that real, it's like 1800s right now with AI.
Right.
We're slowly working towards what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence, which becomes more human-like. And then eventually you're going to get super intelligence, and then you'll have singularity. So again, no one really knows. We could be a decade to 30, 40, 50 years away from singularity. But when we get to singularity, you're not going to know if you're dealing with a human or an AI. And that is where things get really freaky and crazy.
These were great topics, so valid. And always, you are such a wonderful co-host.
And you are an amazing host. And I greatly appreciate this opportunity to talk to you, but also talk to our audience as well. And I encourage everyone to give us some feedback. Tell us some things that you want us to focus on. You want us to talk about trends? You want us to talk just about news, combination thereof? And then also, too, is anybody interested in maybe us doing some live streams or other type of special broadcasts? So,
yeah, I think so. We're just in the early stages of this show, and I think it's just a matter of feeling our way through it. I certainly think that the content that we're bringing is relevant and relative to the industry. So thanks again. Where can they find you, Jim? Where mostly are you online?
So really, for me, the best place to go to would be LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn as a professional, make sure that you are on LinkedIn. You have a very good profile, completely done and adequately there for people to search. But reach to me, and you'll find me under not Jim, but James Kunkel. And you'll find different levels of content I do, and also some of the things related to my new LLC, which is called ProCoat Tech. I just released a video on Monday kind of explaining the genesis of ProCoat Tech, and also my phase 1 content strategy. So you'll find that on my profile if you do check me out on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. I look forward to the next month's show, August. We'll see what we'll come up with and comment on. Have a great day, everyone. Aloha. Thanks for joining In the News with Kim and Jim. Please drop us a comment below and tell us what your thoughts are of today's news articles and what you thought about the show. See you next time.